I was telling you how I was planning on getting Apollo on my arm, and you were talking about how you're gonna do some more tattoos. And before you tell that story, I'm just gonna say this is the Flathead Monster podcast, and I'm Brian Russell. So I'm here with Brendan Love. My idea with this, really, just for people who are listening, is just to do something really simple and talk to people about interesting things. That's it. Nothing more weird and complicated than that, and hopefully pretty rough a little bit. So anyways, we were going to talk about tattoos, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about that. What was your first tattoo, and could you describe it to me and maybe tell me the story about how you got it?
I can show it to you too.
Yeah, but we could have to describe it to me because we don't have any pictures in this little podcast.
Man,
but you can show it to me and maybe I can describe it. Or how about you describe it? Because I'm interested in how you think about it.
It's funny because when you mentioned that, I had not thought about that in years. Like, I don't even think about that tattoo that much. The kids ask about it. But just the flood of memories of trying to remember, like, where that thing came from. And yeah, we were freshmen in college, so it was 1989. It was probably about the same time I met you. And I had a girlfriend who was in the theater department, and she started telling me that all of her friends went out and got drunk and got tattoos. And I had an uncle who had tattoos like back in the day, and I thought they were kind of cool, but they were kind of scary looking, kind of dangerous, I don't know. And he asked me one time if I wanted to get one, and I was about probably 7 or 8 years old, and I was terrified because he told me how you get one on you. But I stored it in the back of my mind because there was something about it that had that appeal, And then later on, I remember, I guess it was 1986, getting that first Cro-Mags album and flipping it over. And there was that picture of them, like there's this iconic picture of them just in a doorway, all covered in tattoos. And I was just like, that was that like horror factor again that I just knew, like, I got to do this. And I kept thinking and thinking, so I knew it was going to happen at some point. And then this girlfriend of mine says, let's go get tattoos. Like, my friends did it, we should do it. And we were kind of simpatico for, 6 months or something like that. It was nothing, it wasn't like we were getting matching tattoos or anything. It was just something to do. So we started looking in the phone book, and there was a place in Roanoke that was like, I recognized the address because I had gotten my car towed there the summer before. When Metallica played there, we got backstage passes to go see Metallica in Roanoke, so had to do that. And we came out and our tires were slashed, so they towed our car to this like junkyard that was like, turns out, right next door to the tattoo place. So I kind of knew where it was. And we get down there, drive down there, and it's like, Junkyard Row in Roanoke at this like CD place. I still remember the place. And we go in there, and the guy is like, probably just wants to go home. He wants to have a cigarette, that kind of thing. These two dopes show up. And so we start looking through the flash, and we kind of negotiate this, like, 2 tattoos for like $60, I think, something like that. So I wind up, I picked mine out in like 2 seconds. It was a tiny little cherub right here on my hip.
Oh, neat. Oh, wow.
In lovely biker
He's
style.
wearing, he has the bow out like he's going to shoot someone in the heart so they're going to fall in love.
Yeah, just a classic little cherub. And, in a classic biker style, the guy was gross as hell. I mean, to think back now, like, I would, would I get a tattoo from this guy now? I don't know. And then I started thinking about it even more, and I remembered that the next year, a whole bunch of us decided to go from the dorm again, and I was like, hey, I know the place, man, we should go. So we go down there, and it was somebody else working there, and like 3 or 4 of us walked out with like, oh, this guy, I mean, I don't know if he just gotten released or he was just on parole or something, but I mean, we all walked out with these jailhouse tattoos that still, you know what I'm talking about, like, just mine's on my back. I'm sure my friend's got like this other thing. I don't know if he ever got it fixed or covered up or whatever. I've had mine reworked a couple of times, and it's like, I cannot wait to just get this thing completely covered up because it is just disgusting.
I think people don't realize that tattoos aren't necessarily forever and that you can cover them up.
True.
You can alter them. I mean, and anything, you could alter them. I mean, but that does mean more tattoo and not less tattoo, but it's still, you can fix them, air quotes.
Well, I've been trying to figure out, like, how am I going to fix this thing? Because it's like, there's part of me, you know, as just unattached as I am to it, you know, like I've thought about trying to like work it into a larger back piece so that it's just sort of there. But I don't know if that's something that I even want to mess with, you know, at this point. I think like that, I don't want to necessarily like attempt to elevate it, although, I mean.
I think it's not a bad idea. I think I don't have a ton of tattoos. I have nearly as many as you do. I think just to describe is that you have them almost both to both your wrists, and you have your entire arms from your shoulders down covered, just about.
Pretty much.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
And what else? I mean,
I got
you have stuff in your chest. I mean, describe what part of your body. I mean, most of your chest, is that mostly? And you have some stuff in your legs too, right?
A little bit on my leg. Oh, did you ever see the leg thing?
I'm not sure I have.
Tell me if this rings a bell.
Oh my God, yeah, that's gonna dovetail nicely into a story I'm about to tell of Dave Carradine, actually.
That's funny. I've been thinking about that guy a lot lately.
So hi, Dave. And so Dave Carradine gave me my first 2 tattoos, and the first one was on my left arm, and it's a psychic TV cross. And we were sitting in a field in Washington, D.C., a very visceral memory. It was like a little needle and some ink, you know. It was very
like a little pokey one?
Yeah, very jailhousey. It is now covered up. No longer there anymore, because I was like, to hell with it, because I wanted to do something on my left arm. And the other one he did with a gun is on my chest.
Oh yeah.
And it's sort of it's like a coat of arms. And now I look at it as a symbol of that place and time. So I don't hate it so much as I used to. I just look at it like I don't want to screw with it too much, because it just brings me back to then. And do you have any tattoos that, like you described your first one that's sort of that way, but do you have any other ones where you're like, I'm not sure I feel about this, but it's there because it's in this important part of my life this time?
I had a piece that was drawn up by Errol over at Blue Flame Tattoo. And it was originally going to be on my arm or something. And when we were looking at it, it looked like this is more of a chest piece. So he started putting it on there. And once I was committed, you know, to the outline, it was when I realized like this is way more than was willing to like put up with. So probably like 3 or 4 little sessions, I've kind of been getting it worked on and everything, and I think I'm done. It's going to stay the way it is pretty much for the rest of its life, like half shaded, half colored. So you've talked about negative space on your chest. I've got like a good kind of unfinished tattoo. And the thing that made me feel a lot better was when Errol showed me his chest piece, which was just an outline, and he said, I'm done. That's it. My chest is done. And it inspired me. But yeah, I'm kind of at that point now, like, you know, trying to like integrate everything together, you know, so I don't look so pork choppy or whatever. I was getting something done and I just couldn't take it anymore. And so it was time to pack it up. And I said, hey, will you just put a name on me? And he said, man, don't make me do this. And I was like, no, I got it. You got to put it on there. So I got my wife's name.
Oh, that's
right
great.
on there. And I came home and I remember I said, I showed it, you know, I was showing her some of the other things that I gotten done. And then when I kind of unveiled that, she just looked like crestfallen almost, you know, like I was like, not the reaction that I was expecting at all. And it turns out that we didn't know it until like maybe a couple of days later that we were expecting Malcolm. So her reaction was like not what she expected either. So I kind of always felt like that was sort of like a real kind of important little moment there.
That's
like
awesome.
Some kind of something going on that we didn't know about, but there it was right on the skin.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask you, I think you might be one of the first people I knew about their tattoos or having tattoos. I mean, of course, in Richmond in the 90s, a lot of people were covered. So I saw them a lot, especially my friend Derek Armstrong. But I want to ask you about yours is that it seems like you, if this am I correct, have lots of individual tattoos that you've got more and more and more, where you may have spent a couple hours each session in the chair, and then over time they've gotten more and more, and they became more of a total carpet of things. Is that correct?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's funny because you know, I like looking at people who've got like really intentional sleeves, like, you know, the Japanese style or like a whole body suit. Just, you know, that's the kind of thing, like I admire that greatly, but it just never fit into like my worldview, you know. I'm kind of like more in the, you know, like agnostic front, you know, NBA, you know, kind of suit of whatever, you know, whatever you were going to put on.
But yours are really cool, and they all look like professionals, you know, did them. You know, a lot of people, I mean, you see kids with tattoos on their knuckles and on their face and all this stuff, and clearly you're like, you know.
It's weird seeing that, like that, you know, like that. You know, you see these guys who are like, you know, are apprenticing tattoo artists, and it's just like they start with their eyes and they start with their neck and their wrists and their hands and knuckles and everything. And like, I mean, I remember Mark Van Ness is the one who's done most of my sleeves, I think. You know, there was one day where I was in there and we were kind of wrapping up something, and I wanted to get that Roman numeral, and he was like, well, you know, he kind of quizzed me a little bit, like, are you ready to do your hands? And I mean, I knew that I was ready, and he kind of knew that I knew, but like, you know, a good, you know, reputable dude is going to help keep you, you know, not mess up your whole thing. So yeah, I got really lucky that when I linked up with him, because I could just go in and just say like, hey, you know, I kind of want, you know, this right here, and he would freehand it right there, you know, unless more space, you know, I mean, there's not more space opening up, but.
I mean, right now in my life, I kind of wish I'd started earlier and just said $200 here, $100 here, $300 there, because then at this point, I would have more like you do. But it was a couple years ago where I was determined to do like a whole sleeve that sort of was like completely inked, you know, and with very little gaps unless it was part of a thing, and that's why I started and want to finish. But I admire the way you've, you know, done that over the years to get to the point where you are with, you know, little bits here, little bits there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's funny because there's a lot of waiting, you know, where you realize like, you know, like when you get that one, I went in and said, you know, okay, I want a mom tattoo, and Kristen Close did that one. So, you know, it's kind of, you know, filled up that much of it. You know, it's like, okay, cool. You know, now I got this and this, you know, but then I got all this, and, you know, once it started filling up, all of a sudden, that's actually I feel like it's more fun now because, you know, these big, like, you know, giant pieces that are so like, you know, overwrought, you know, thinky kind of things that I've been thinking about for my whole life have to be symbolized here. Like, those are pretty much done. So now it's like, you know, I was in there and I said, hey, Mark, will you just put a cup of coffee right there? And, you know, he just buzzed this little perfect cup of coffee right there, you know, and like, if I just want to, because now I feel like if I just want to go in and just get some, I can get like some real like obnoxious rock and roll shit, which is kind of what I'm really into now. And so like now I'm trying to find apprentices for some of the people that have done work on me, because, you know, that way you can go in, like, I'm trying to think, like this one, like that one, $20.
Corrosion of conformity?
Yeah.
Dude, that's awesome. When was that $20?
I got that 2 years ago.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So,
oh, wow, cool.
Yeah, I called Mark and I said, hey, listen, I got, you know, I'm covered with his like most beautiful work, and you know, he understands, you know, when I say like I just want some like really obnoxious looking stuff, some punk rock tattoos, like what,
yeah.
Do you know anybody? He said, yeah, man, I got my apprentice right here. Just, you know, boom, and we set up an appointment at $20. You put that on.
You have a bass clef on your body somewhere too, right?
Yes, right here.
So, and that's on your right arm there, the top, right at the top of your thumb where your wrist meets your hand, right? Mm-hmm. What's the story behind that one?
That, I mean, well, you know, you're sitting in the bass room, so you know that like
there's like 5 or 6 basses in this room.
Man, so, you know, I'm committed to music. What are the symbols that kind of link into like my traditions and that kind of stuff, and that's when it like really started getting fun for like just buzz one of those on there because, and you know, and I get asked about it all the time. It's such a like conversation starter, you know, because people are like, is that some kind of money? Or is that, you know, like, you know, or like they don't, you know, they kind of recognize
Right.
it, but they don't know exactly what it is. And then, you know, if I tell them, they just know exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
You
And
know,
you're
so-
a right-handed basis, and it's on your right arm, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So, you know.
Where
so
you're playing
where I can
mostly
always
with your
look.
hands. Yeah.
You know, and so like that kind of thing, like, you know, like my totems, like the first one that I got so it's funny, like you were talking about when you got started, you know, like getting the poking sticks and, you know, like your buddy's got a new tattoo gun that he needs to try out kind of stuff. And I remember getting, you know, so I got like, you know, the first one turned out well. It turned, you know, it was like a good experience, no infection, you know, and I like it. Second one was like a total disaster, and that, you know, and then like third time was getting that fixed, and then the fourth one was kind of like also pretty scuzzy, and then the fifth one not looking so great. So I took a long break. I took like, you know, probably at least a 15-year break where I just was like doing the research and thinking about it and that kind of stuff. And so like, which all then culminates to like one night I'm like, you know, kind of out partying, and I wind up like thinking, I'm just gonna get a tattoo right now. And so I went to Dog Star, and they were trying to close, and you know, the guy was like, okay, fine. And I started with the black flag bars, which, you know, because at the time it was like, you know, I mean, it's a symbol that has followed me for my whole life and everything, and it's like, you know, a perfect testament to like how you like probably just don't want to put band symbols on your body because they're always going to show up later. You know, when I'm thinking about like, you know, okay, what am I going to put on myself next? You know, because like my plan is just to go in next time and kind of like, you know, get this sort of like big chest piece kind of like integrated into the shoulders, so it's not looking like just this abandoned project, you know. And so I've been thinking like, yeah, okay, do I want a Neubauten tattoo? You know, because like, and you know, or like, I mean, I can't even believe that I'm saying it, but there are times where I'm like, where am I going to put a crash symbol? Like I've gotten to this point in my life and still have not gotten a crash symbol tattoo. But, you know, yeah, and it's like, I mean, that's just a perfect example of one that you got to work, you know, when you get them when you're like 15, then you got to like work around it the whole rest of your life, you know, until you realize that you can cover it up.
What's the story with your baby Igor tattoo, and maybe describe what it looks like?
The actual artwork I got, because Matthias was drawing it, and I was living with Matthias, and he was drawing it, and I guess they then like made the copy and then started making the EP and everything, and he just sort of like handed me the artwork, and it got stuffed into something. And then when I moved to Chicago, you know, it was like I had this cool piece of artwork sitting in front of me with no connection to the band, you know, like who would ever, you know, no one's gonna look at me and say like, that's a baby Igor tattoo. So I just happened to get it because it was cool. But the thing that made it really kind of funny was that like in the very early days, I auditioned for baby Igor and probably did, you know, like I guess I did a rehearsal with them, and then they kind of, I guess I just never got another phone call. You know, at that point I was just not as accomplished as a bassist as, you know, I would become later or whatever, because they, you know, they were just aiming a little higher than where I was. But it was really funny because then I remember Jimmy Kapinski saw it like years later and was like, "Why did you get that?" You know.
I think it's cool.
I didn't know you liked him that much, but you know, I mean, I did like him at the time for sure.
So you've got a couple band tattoos, which I think is really cool, and I need to do that because I don't know, man. I guess once you have more, you feel more less precious about your skin maybe, and you realize like, hey, it's just a tattoo. Who cares, right? Sort of, a little bit. Maybe.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that's the thing that like you kind of cross a threshold. I guess at some point everybody will, you know, where it's like you've kind of like you can kind of take a deep breath. You've kind of gotten all the big things that you wanted to symbolize, and then yeah, it's just kind of like, what do I want to get next? You know, so like you were saying, like, I don't know, I just want to, you know, like your calf is a good repository for something, things that you would never have gotten before, or all of a sudden like, oh, you know, if you see something like, you know, somebody got this tattoo that you would never considered for yourself, and all of a sudden you can kind of see what it might look like. You know, I mean, obviously like in the 80s and the 90s was like, you know, when it was just a different thing then. You know, you got a tattoo that was like this big and it was in this shape. Yeah, like, you know, like sort of a mango shaped thing on your bicep, you know, like everybody had, or like, you know, one on your forearm that's sort of like, you know, like Popeye or something. You know, when you meet an artist who's looking, I mean, like, you know, Mark here, you know, like I had this space right here. I gotten this filled in, this eye in the ditch, and then, and I don't know if you remember, like, we were all living here in Durham. I got this thing.
It's in the crook of his right arm.
Yeah, just this eyeball, kind of on a whim, just had it with me, and I was in a tattoo shop, and the guy put it on there, and then I was just sort of left with this, like, kind of weird, silly looking tattoo right there. And then when, kind of described it, I said, I want, you know, kind of like a Rick Griffin rock poster kind of thing, and told her, you know, the word that I wanted to have on there. And she drew that up, and it was like, you know, I almost fell out of my chair because I would have never envisioned that for my arm. And then Mark kind of bringing this whole thing around and kind of turning this crab that kind of comes around that links up with this other face that he put on there, and this paintbrush kind of coming away from the black flag tattoo with the ladybugs on it. And, you know, just, I mean, I would have sat down and conceptualized that all at once. So like having that kind of come up in pieces, drips and drabs, kind of, I don't know, made it more me. And it's funny because like there's that kind of thing where like they're such conversation starters, you know, once people can kind of see them, your kind of preconceived notions about how people are going to react to your tattoos really start falling away. Even, you know, as much as other people's preconceived notions of me are going to fall away pretty quickly once they start talking to me, I'm always amazed by like how many people just don't care, you know, or they ask questions about it and you can tell that they're just curious and not like, you know, just trying to segue into some, you know, judgmental comment or something like that.
That's a good point. I want to ask you about that. This is one more question, and that is, when I grew up, I felt like most people that I knew in the suburbs were really tattoos bad, or negative about tattoos. And it wasn't until I went to art school and about a bunch of people, mostly rock and roll kids, you know, that didn't care. Was that a similar experience for you, or was it different?
Little insight into like how my parents started getting involved in this whole thing, because the first one I went and got, and they never saw, because I mean, why would they ever see that? So that was hidden pretty well. And then the one, when we went back for the one on my back, that intervening summer, I'd gone home to Virginia Beach where my parents lived, and I was kind of working. And at some point I went to the library and looked up books on tattoos, and they had a couple of them. They had this like really classic one called Stoney Knows How. And it's about this guy who was like, you know, one of these like carnival tattooers back in the 40s or something like that, you know, and it's like, obviously it's a long book that you
anchors, ladies.
Oh yeah, just, you know, and it's in all his wild tales, you know. And so I read that and just couldn't believe it. It's like, whoa. And they had this other one that it was called Pigments of the Imagination, and it was missing, like somebody had stolen it. And so I put in a request that was like, you know, let me know when this thing, you know, comes back in, if somebody returns it or you get a new copy or something. And so then I forgot about it, went to school, and I had just gotten this like bad tattoo on my back. And I'm trying to figure out like, how am I going to explain this thing, or how am I going to get it fixed or whatever. And then I get a letter from my father who's, you know, like telling me, you know, giving me the news around the house and everything. And then he sort of like ends the letter with this mention that, you know, like my library request kind of finally came in for this tattoo book, so I can go pick it up. And I was really surprised, because he just said like, it's just like my duty as a parent to just tell you to like really think hard before you do something like that, which was, I really like, it's sort of an uncharacteristically gentle kind of admonition from my father, who is, you know, I mean, we probably talked about it, you know, like old-fashioned FBI agent, you know, who definitely was not a tattoo type. And yeah, so like that was how my parents figured out that I was starting to get tattooed.
That's great.
And so, you know, this first few, they kind of, you know, I mean, they probably knew, you know, I looked like, if I had continued along that path in the, you know, late 80s, early 90s, I mean, I would have looked like exactly what they expected I was going to look like. You know, I would have looked like a jailhouse creep, you know, what, you know, like that you kind of envision of just poorly tattooed. So I'm glad I took that break, you know, like after that. But they didn't really give me too much grief over that.
Do you think tattoo artists in general, younger people, younger than us, have gotten better at their craft than maybe people we knew in the 80s that were doing work?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, it's really interesting because I mean, I'm always astounded. Like, you know, when I moved to this area, you know, it was almost 20 years ago, there were some really significantly like good tattoo artists. You know, that it wasn't hard to find a good tattoo artist, but like I can't even keep up now with like who is who or who these new people are, because there just seem to be so many people like learning from each other and drawing on these, you know, this like longer like body of work and, you know, the experimentation that's already been done. So yeah, I feel like it's yeah, they're definitely getting better and getting better faster. And but you know, I mean, then there's all that, like, I mean, that's like sort of like from the artistic aspect of it, you know, in terms of like how they conduct themselves,
right?
Like,
right.
You know, what their, you know, what their persona is like,
and the diversity of styles and the trends of styles. Like I've seen things that are a lot more abstract than they were in the past.
Yeah, all this watercolor.
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of
cubist,
things, and just geometric shapes and things, which I think in the past, one was not the people that I met that made tattoos and were interested in that style, and I don't think they believed that was capable of putting that on the body successfully. They did, but yet all the stuff I see on Instagram, I'm like, wow, they did this. And it doesn't mean those types of tattoo artists weren't around in the past.
Look, you know, if you look through a tattoo magazine from like the mid 90s or something like that, you're not going to be really like desirous of a lot of what's going on in there. You know what I mean? Because it's like it's going to look dated. Like a lot of it's going to look dated. It's going to look, you know, like a prevailing style at the time. You know, and I don't want to knock like. You know,
no, me either.
But, you know, I mean, we all have tattoos where it's like, wow, you know, if I'd taken this idea to somebody in 2019, it would have turned out to be a whole different ball game. But I don't know. So it's funny, like when you reminded me of this thing a couple of, I guess about less than a year ago, I was volunteering over at school, and this kid came walking up to me and he goes, "You got a lot of tattoos." And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "You must have a ton of regrets," and just walked away.
Wow. I think, I imagine he was what, 5, something like that?
He was about 8 or something like that. But it's interesting because then I think he was kind of like, he was being a little deliberately provocative, but then he kind of asked me about it, and I realized, I told him that, you know, this is like how I kind of remind myself of how fortunate I am. And I think he kind of understood it a little bit differently then, but you could definitely tell like this kid saw me as like, you know, some kind of outlaw making really poor choices.
Well, I totally know that's like the opposite. I know that's totally not the truth. Well, on that note, thank you, Brendan, for talking to me about this. It's fun because I knew you had lots of stories about this stuff, and you tell them so well, and I was really interested, and I think other people will be too. So thanks.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Absolutely.